next guest, he's a French-German dual national. He's got extensive experience in the private and public sector. He was actually a special advisor to the French Minister of Defense for European defense policy, technology, and innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome André Loesekrug. Thank you.
Hello.
Good to have you here.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, so I hope you will be as fresh and interactive as I am. I'm going to talk to you about J.E.D.I. I don't have my laser saber with me, but I guess you will all wonder which kind of empires we will try to fight. Just maybe to start with this slide, and especially this one. Who is annoyed about this kind of titles that was published a couple of weeks ago in The Economist? Only that? Don't you see that something is missing here? Yeah, Switzerland, of course. Now, Europe. Where is Europe? And it's interesting because in this whole paper, which is, of course, for a very intellectual elite group, there was almost no word about what the Europeans are doing about innovation. And I thought the last talk was just very interesting because we talked about disruption, how important innovation was for future growth. I will go even beyond. It's probably important for the future of our systems, our democratic systems. They are under attack. They are under attack because in France, En Marche, which is the president's party, was hacked. That we like it or not, Mr. Orban in Hungary was elected with 48% of the votes. He, of course, used social media in a way that was able to change the way. Public surveillance, I mean, I was amazed, and this is a luxury you have here in Switzerland, that there was no control. But unfortunately, in France and Germany, when you enter these kind of premises, there's controls, etc. So technology, risks, security has changed the way we live. But we don't really want to have a surveillance state, which is today being built up in a country which I had the pleasure to live in 10 years, which is China. So what can we really do, and are we losing the tech battle? Well, we can say we have amazing talent, yes. We are doing great things, yes. We are putting tons of money, yes. But the fact is, yes, we are losing the tech battle. I mean, this is a very, it's oriented to French and German audience, but CAC 40 is basically the largest 40 French companies. DAX is the largest 30 German companies. They are dwarfed by the market cap of the 7 largest platforms, the 4 US, the 5 US, and the 4 Chinese. I mean, by a factor of 3. It's crazy. You know, now that you have 2 $1 trillion companies. That's only one indicator. The second indicator, I mean, innovation is not just about AI, but AI is an interesting topic. When you look at the VC investment last year, I'm not talking 10 years ago, 48% to China, 38% to the US. 14%, ladies and gentlemen, that's us, the rest of the world. It's Korea, it's Japan, it's Israel, it's Russia, it's Switzerland, it's the whole European Union. It's crazy. We are completely lost in this battle. And when you look at the last part, the 10 largest companies in the world, yes, you have 8 which are American, 2 which are Chinese, but what is much more worrying is that 3 years ago, there were only 4 tech companies in the top 10. Now there are 7. And probably in the next 18, 24 months, 10 out of 10. What does it mean? That means growth of tomorrow, prosperity of tomorrow, power relationships and how we can defend our models is being modeled by technology. So what can we do about it? Well, unfortunately, if we don't do a huge step and stop the small measures, the risk is that the situation is only getting worse. I mean, for all of you who are entrepreneurs, I've been for 12 years, just to give a quick introduction of who you have in front of you. For 12 years, I was an entrepreneur, then I turned VC. You can say I went to the dark side of the force. And last May, completely by accident, I landed in one of the cabinets of a minister in France when Macron was elected, thinking it's probably time to help and to contribute to the transformation of our country. Let's see if we succeed in that. And what we realize in the entrepreneurship world, but also in the large corporate world, is that more and more being disruptive, being number one is not anymore luxury. You could have great number two, number three strategies a couple of years ago. As you know, now there is more and more this winner takes all world. I give you just one example which is striking. When you look at online advertising in the US, 90% of the revenue is Facebook and Google. So all the others, of course the big print media, and they only get 10% of the share. So if you're not, so disruptive innovation, that's why it's so important for us, is a huge risk for us, Europeans, to be behind, or, and that's the positive message, it's a huge opportunity for us to reshuffle the cards. I mean, I don't know how much is it in Switzerland, but I know in France and Germany and the UK, people keep lamenting about the power of the platforms. But what do we do against it? We can defend ourselves. We don't really believe in a defensive strategy. We should not be naive. How do we get back in the offense? Going back in the offense and getting the next slide. Okay, so what do we do today? And I'm just going to repeat what has just been said. We invest, we decide slowly. We focus on small incremental steps. We do small and fragmented investments. I give you an example. The EU is investing 80 billion euro every 7 years in innovation. That's a huge amount of money, but that's spread over more than 10,000 projects. We don't follow up. Once we give the money, very rarely we see, is there anything coming out? And to quote somebody I did not know before, but I was pretty impressed by the previous panel, we don't know how, by the CEO of Swisscom, it was interesting to see that we cannot stop once a project does not work. And we all know as entrepreneurs that we need to do 90 degrees turns, 180 degrees turns. And last but not least, a lot of the research is focused on publication. The problem is, and every VC or every industrialist in the room will know, very rarely a VC is investing on a research paper. You need a prototype. You need to invest big. You need to be able to stop, try, experiment. So, what have we decided to do? And this is a huge, ambitious goal, but it's probably the only one. Well, it's to create what we very modestly, that's probably the French part in me, call the European moonshot factory. I know the guys from the private sector, I was one of them until last April, I was saying, ooh, is this another kind of technocratic, bureaucratic endeavor? There's a risk, clearly. But I don't know if you know the commonality of these three inventions. And who has an iPhone in the room? Please raise the hand. Okay. You all have 60 inventions in your iPhone, which was invented by a US agency called the DARPA. The most famous of it is Siri. Siri, most probably most of you don't know, Siri was developed by the Stanford Research Institute, later bought by Apple, which always add an I, that became Siri. It was, in 2005, the first program for AI voice recognition. At that time, people thought, why this? No business case, etc. Today, we all know. The internet was initially called ARPANET, coming out of DARPA. The idea is to create a resilient network that is spread. And the first challenge for driverless cars that became Google cars and today Waymo was a DARPA challenge. So we want to emulate this. And what is the DARPA methodology? It's not about the money. Yes, they invest $3 billion a year. That's huge. But basically, they decide super fast because we don't know what's going to happen in a month. So how can we plan 18 months ago? So trust first. If somebody comes with a crazy idea and he has a completely new way to tackle a problem, let's propose it. We decide to grant 10, 20, 25 million euro for every project which today we consider is underfunded, but which can have a huge potential to disrupt an industry. So I will show you a few examples of what we're going to launch as a challenge, but that was the idea of the internet. That was the idea of the driverless cars. In the new space area, the Falcon rockets, the ones who are powering SpaceX, are also a NASA DARPA-funded project because at that time nobody believed, and the Europeans still don't really believe, unfortunately, in reusable rockets. For those of you who have seen the video of Falcon Heavy coming back in January with the 2 boosters landing, it's science fiction, but it's reality. So let's decide fast. Let's put a lot of money into. Let's not do, and this is very important for us, there is a lot of VCs, and the response of Europe has always been to say we need more VC money. Indeed, it's important. We need to scale these companies. But before we scale them, we also need to invent and to have a technological edge. And this is our razor-sharp focus. We want to fill a gap of everything which today is too risky or too long-term for the private sector. And that's where we see a role for the public sector. And that has been the massive role that the US government played in the Silicon Valley in the 60s and still today in these advanced projects. Huge concentration on time. These challenges in the typical research world will take 5, 10, 15 years. So what the DARPA is doing is they push only on two things. They give complete liberty, technological choices, but they say you do it as fast as possible, and if it does not work, we can stop almost from one day to another. But isn't that a completely new paradigm of the relationship between the state and the ecosystem and the entrepreneurs to say, we trust you first, if you don't deliver, we take the money back, instead of what we too often see, which is to say, oh, you will get 500,000 here and 200,000, and we transform the whole ecosystem in bounty hunters, which is unfortunately the case today. So it's a radical change of mindset that we need. First, let's not start with 27, 28 countries. Let's go with the countries that want to start first. The French deep tech ecosystem is on board, the German one. I'm very happy to also tell you that we have a few key players, but we need more of the Swiss ecosystem. The president of ETH is one of the J.E.D.Is. You can tell him next time you meet him. We start 2018. Right now, European Union, and I'm genetically a European, but we are currently deciding in Brussels what's going to happen 2021, 2028, because the Commission has still, I mean, the European Union has still these Sovietic GOS plans of 7 years. Who knows what's going to happen in 2028? It's crazy. So you don't have the flexibility. Let's start now. Speed is, and this is the chance for Europe. We should not be impressed. The Chinese are very good at making us also feel small when you hear Alibaba is investing 15 billion in AI. First, I think a lot of this is probably a lot of BS. But, you know, the battle is also fought in the heads. So we should not be too much worried. And Israel or Singapore shows us that speed can compensate money. And last but not least, we need to create a European model. The DARPA was created when Sputnik was launched. It was the time of this Cold War. Obviously, everything was defense-linked. We don't believe that technology for technology is a European value. But we believe that technology to solve big societal challenges, this is something where we can get not just the elite, which is probably represented here in this room, but the whole population to invest much more in science and technology. And last but not least, and I can tell you that in a bureaucratic country like France, which I think is on the right path, it's a huge mindset, is to say the state should give the big directions, but leave the ecosystem, leave the heads of the big research centers, the founders of the most capable deep tech startups, also the heads of the big companies. I don't believe in this purely startup because you need these big companies to scale them. They need to choose the technological bricks, and they need to implement that in order to have the speed and the agility that is critical. So we are ready. What have we done? Because this whole adventure started last September. We brought together 120 J.E.D.Is. So I mentioned one of them in Switzerland. There are 60, a few of them are in the room. Some deep tech founders in France, in Germany, in Estonia, in Italy. So it's yes, there's a strong French-German base, but it's a very inclusive project for all the European continent. All the heads of the big research centers and universities are part of that, and also most of the CEOs of the large tech corporates. And we identified 30 challenges to launch, and this is not trivial. For those of you who have done either philosophy or math, you know that asking the right question is already half of the problem. And just saying invest more in AI or invest more in cyber is, sorry, it's stupid. what exactly are the challenges we need to solve? What are the bottlenecks? What are things which today are not invested by the private sector? And without going too much into the detail, I'm happy to answer a few questions on that. The key success factor of DARPA is the fact that they decide quick, but then they really coach the projects without taking technological choices, but they push them to go faster. And for that, you need program managers, which, as we say in France, sorry to use a French word for that, a mouton à cinq pattes, which means people who have very strong scientific background, technology background, great program managers, and mature enough not to micromanage. As you know, people we all would like to have in our organization. And we changed the landscape. I mean, we made this proposal end of August 2017. 1 month later, the French president took over exactly our proposal and announced in his famous Sorbonne speech, which was his European speech, I want to set up an agency for disruptive innovation. The Germans, they're always a bit slower. I'm German too, so no worries. It took them 7 months to respond, first with the Minister of Research. The Chancellor backed the idea 3 months later. The whole French regions, with people who have very strong political differences, backed this project and say, we are close to our ecosystem, we need to do something. The Europeans, who were entirely focused on scaling up companies, which obviously is important. We have a lot of startups, how do we build unicorns? Understood and added that to the European strategy, unfortunately only starting 2021. And we get political impetus. But beyond these big announcements, we don't see a lot happening. From the press, just to give you that, it's not to brag, but there has been amazing response, just because it was a completely new voice to what you typically hear. It's not top-down like the traditional European response. It's not purely bottom-up, because if you do only pure bottom-up, you don't have the focus, the choices, the priorities, so you will never catch up and never leapfrog compared to our big challenges in the East and in the West. And especially, we got excitement of the ecosystem, but more generally from the parliaments and from the citizens each time we do a presentation in smaller or larger audiences than today, because we have 4 big missions. One is the whole topic about climate change, decarbonizing the economy. And under that, you have a lot of technological bricks. You have obviously the topic of smart grids and batteries and autonomous driving. I just give you an example. I mean, we're in Zurich. I heard that Zurich is getting very strong in the whole region also on blockchain. We don't know if blockchain will be the big thing than the crypto maniacs are saying. Maybe, but what is sure is that blockchain is one way to disrupt the large platforms, because it's taking away the need for the centralized data. But what is the big problem of blockchain today is the energy consumption, among others. It's huge energy consumption. If every financial transaction was on blockchain, we would have twice the energy consumption of the US. So it's unbearable. So one of the challenges we're going to launch, and nobody has an answer today, is develop an algo for blockchain which consume 10 times, maybe 100 times less energy. You completely change the name of the game. Kerosene, you may also know that today we have not found anything better than fuel. The problem is that the airline industry will contribute to almost 10% of greenhouse gases in the near future. Find a fuel which has 2 times, 3 times the energy density than today. Healthcare, massively improving healthcare. This is our second topic, where you get also people excited. Okay, we can talk about nuclear, non-nuclear, but the problem we have today is the nuclear waste. And the only solution we have is to bury it very, very deep, or to export it. How can we reduce the radioactivity? How can we do, this is already done, the 3D printing, but it's still for very basic organs. Third big challenge is obviously the digital transition, but for us, we think it's the human-centric digital transition. How do we make sure that all these new digital tools are actually improving work and life? So how can we do AI unlearning? As you know, one of the big problems of AI is the fact that once you have a corrupted or biased data set, it's extremely difficult or quasi impossible to unlearn it. So you need basically to throw it out and start again with huge costs. AI unlearning, huge topic, which one of the J.E.D.Is, Jürgen Schmidhuber, who is in Switzerland, is also working on that. How can we do 1-second airport security screening? I'm sure all of you are dreaming of this. I dreamt of that this morning, to 20 minutes. extremely complicated. But you see, simple challenge, clear metric, and not prescriptive at all. We don't know how it's going to happen. How do we manage our privacy requirements with the fact that we want to keep our public spaces safe? The only solution today we have is massive surveillance with big data lakes, etc. How can we do a face recognition AI which is so small, so low energy consuming that it can be distributed with much less privacy concerns? And the last thing is new frontiers. I mean, it's hard to believe, but Kennedy was only a president for 3 years, and look how he changed. He's the one who invented or developed or pushed this idea of moonshots, because at one point we also need to look for the new frontiers. And the new frontiers today is space and oceans. The challenge today is obviously access to low Earth orbit, where Europeans are completely disrupted, and it's just because you still have a few state contracts that we're not completely out of the name of the game. But look at the reaction of the space industry in Europe with Falcon, was to say, oh, let's build our own reusable rocket in 2026. We dare to say 2026, it's an eternity. The world will have changed, and reusable rockets is the thing of today. How do we invent the thing of tomorrow? And it's not going to be a bit longer, a bit better, a bit faster rocket. How do we do underwater mining without the environmental impact? This whole topic of microplastics is much more complicated than just presenting like that, but it's a huge challenge. So the main message I wanted to give you, something's happening in Europe. It is led by the ecosystem. It has strong government support from the top level, but obviously this is going against any kind of traditional bureaucratic way of handling. People say, oh, it's public money. It needs to be a ministerial officer who decides that. We all know that if this happens, we will do what we've done in the last couple of years in Europe, investing 100 million euro in a European search engine, no result. Investing 500 million euro in European cloud, no result. I think European cloud providers do 4% market share. We tried to do carbon storage, €500 million, completely pulverized. So we need to change the methodology. And we have started. So in 2018, that means in the next 3 months, we are going to actually adapt the methodology of fast prototyping to this agency itself. And we're going to, instead of doing a huge concept paper and waiting for a €1 billion budget, which is what we're aiming for in 2021, is we're going to launch in the next couple of weeks 3 to 4 challenges that are going to be financed up to 10-15 million euro each. Pure grants, no return on investment expected. Does not mean it's spent money like that. It's very, very demanding, but the key is to say, if you ask for return on investment, you will not go for the most risky project. And just to give you something that you need to get in your head twice to understand it, we always say in Europe, oh, you need to take risk. It's okay to lose 7 or 8 out of your 10 companies when you're a VC. DARPA has an incredible sentence, which is to say, if more than 10% of the projects we finance hit their milestones, that means we didn't take enough risks. Isn't that crazy? This is the mindset that we are putting in right now in Europe with a huge amount of goodwill. I thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer a few of your questions.